understand that most of you must be from academics and maybe faculty members or the PhD students as well. So I have tried to give some essence of research work which we do here, and which many people may take it further, because a lot of research is needed before something can come practically implementable that way. Okay, so if we look at India's overall energy sector, then you can just Indian, I am just trying to keep some Indian context so that we can relate to. Okay, otherwise your whatever methods you discuss or whatever concepts we discuss more or less remain same globally. But when we talk about our own country, we feel linked to it. So if we look at Indian power sector, we have right now also around 61.3% of solar of thermal. And if someone has looked at the various previous year data, you may see there is a consistent or small decline in the thermal percentage every year. So every year more and more renewables get added, or the other sources get added, and thermal is having some fraction is going down. So few years back, this used to be around 70%, but still it is around 61.3%. And this is the further bifurcation into that on the basis of coal, lignite, or gas, diesel. So I will not go into details of this. But then if you look at the hydro, which recently they have added into renewable. Earlier it was just large hydro. Now at least we have started calling it also renewable. So around 12.12%. Then nuclear stays almost at 2% or less than 2% for many years, very less expansion in nuclear, and then renewable energy sources around 24.8% right now. And this is the in megawatts, this is the installed capacity. So around 382 gigawatts of installed capacity of generation we have. Now, if you look into the left of this slide, these are just sector-wise distribution, central, state, or private sector. So to this I have intentionally kept, because this leads to one of the important change which has happened in the power industry of India. So that's why I have kept this specifically, that there is a state sector, there is a central owned plant, as well as there are private sectors. So that means this just indicates to private participation, which is also approximately 47.4% now. So this is one of the major change which happened after 2003 in Indian power industry, and because of which also we have to change our practices, the way we operate the system, and more and more practices we need, more and more information we start gathering, more and more is the scope for intelligent management. So that's where our role can come into picture. So if we look at annual peak load, this is a bit older, sorry. It is around 181 gigawatt. Last year's peak was around 181 gigawatt. So you should see, for giving a peak load of 181 gigawatt, approximately we have a 382 gigawatts of capacity installed. So how much more? So it's around 181 we have to satisfy yearly peak, I am saying. And then we are having installed capacity of 382 gigawatt. And then also in India, we can't say that we do not have power cuts, right? We are having 24/7 electricity everywhere. No, still we have pockets of areas where the electricity cuts are more than 12 hours. So now if you look at what is the estimation for peak demand increase, so in one of the CA review report, which you can go through, you can find that peak demand is expected to be increased to 690 gigawatt by 2035-36. So if the peak demand of India is 181 gigawatt, we are still not able to serve 24/7 every place, every household, every rural urban community, even with 382 gigawatts of installed capacity. And then for 690 gigawatt, think how much we would need. So we'll need really, really large expansions for generation. And that expansion will, whatever we say cannot be accommodated only with renewable, that will be accommodated with coal, that will be accommodated with nuclear, that will be accommodated with all of them. So that's why if you go to the Ministry of Power website, from there I have taken this data for April 2021. Only this data is, I think, older. This is 181 gigawatt, but rest is April 2021 data. So you can go to Ministry of Power website and you can see that there is whatever is being said about renewable this and that, but there are still ambitious plans for uh, increase in thermal capacity. Okay, so that means we can't get away with any, and we need to learn to manage them wisely, to manage them in such a way that it gives us benefit in all terms. Now, this everybody knows, everybody keeps on talking about that 175 gigawatts of renewable energy was the target by 2022. So 2022 is very close, and all of us knows that we are dealing with pandemic now. So other things might also get affected. So this is where we are right now. So what this slide indicate is that I just want to emphasize over here, that means for serving a 690 gigawatt by 2035-36, we should not only look at expansion of generation. You should do something at this end also. So that means we cannot keep on increasing our load like this. We will have to work on the load management as well. So this has introduced a very important aspect into the power system. Along with generation, you think of load management, you think of demand side management, you think of demand response. So that's where a lot of research work is happening. And if we look at the Indian power sector, various grids, the whole power sector is divided into 5 regional grids: northern region grid, then eastern and western, southeastern and northeastern. So southern and northeastern. So each one of them has some peculiarities. They may be having some special uh, things with them. So if, let's say, you look at the northern region, it is having most of the snow fed or run of the river type of hydro. Large hydros are also there, but most of it is like that also. And then it is highly weather sensitive, and then there are adverse conditions which you might have otherwise also been heard in news or other things. Then if you look at this region, then they have low load, but they have high hydro potential. But because of the geographical and other developmental issues, there is power evacuation problems. If you look into the eastern region, there the load is low, but it has high on the coal reserve, and then most of the plants over there are pit head load plants. So, but we have more to discuss later on. So then, if you look into the western region and southern region, they may be higher load and industrial load is there. Then some hydros. So why we should look into these peculiarities? Because if each of the region has certain peculiarities, then they may have to support each other. So to have a very strong integrated power system where everything is good, we will have to have the interconnections, more strong interconnections. Interconnections are already there. India is having one grid that way. All the 5 regions are connected to each other, but we may have to have more stronger interactions, I would say that. And in that interactions, then a lot of things comes from the point of view of that we forecast better, we plan better, and we manage better. Okay, so if we look at India's frequency variations, this graph is a bit older, but you can find out almost the similar type of graphs for this year also. So this is for June 2021, year back. So this is our frequency band in which the frequency of the supply should remain. So allowed range is around 49.95 to 50.05. But all these red ones shows the violations. So now two things which are very important in interconnected power system is, one is the maintenance of the frequency within a tight band. So, and that band is of course decided based on how strong is your system. And another important thing is that keeping the voltage in the system at each and every bus within permissible. So voltage is still more flexible constraint as compared to the frequency. I would say that, because voltage you might have seen at your household also, it should remain near rated, but it or within plus minus 5% good range, or plus minus 10%. So by that matter, any bus voltage should always remain between 0.9 to 1.1. But at times we have seen the voltages goes even below that range, and above that range. So that those has impacts on the equipment and other things, but still it happens. And then nothing much adverse happens. But frequency is comparatively a more stiffer band and more stiffer constraint, and we have to satisfy it all. Now, if you talk about the higher voltage systems, then of course frequency is more attributed to your real power load and generation balance. And if we talk about the lower voltage system, then of course this frequency is also affected by your real as well as reactive power generation balance. So if you look into the T&D losses, we call it as aggregated transmission and commercial, technical and commercial losses. Sorry, aggregated technical and commercial losses. Uh, so all of us understand in India commercial losses are also there, but at the same time technical losses also we consider. So you can see that these are the losses in the distribution system. In the transmission system, more or less the losses are less. So they are all below 4%. So transmission infrastructure is in the country is strong enough, and of course there are a lot of emphasis on loss reduction and reduction on the unnecessary reactive power exchange between one bus to the other bus. So losses over there has been taken. They also used to be very high earlier, maybe 20 years back. But this distribution losses you can see that are still high in some of the states. In some of the states, they are still quite large. So this is taken from one of the report from Tata Power, where they have given this 2018-19, some open source report only I have taken. So this indicates, few critical things which are very important, and there you can actually perceive research by applying the right techniques and by using the right methods for better system operation. So why this is important to look into the distribution side. So now I will discuss more on the distribution side, because if you this is just taken from a B website. They have given these calculations for, they have certain course for energy auditors. There they try to explain that why we should focus on energy efficiency at distribution level. You can also go through this. So if anyone is interested, I have written the source here. So if you start from the generation, we have many stages. First, we generate in power plants, maybe large hydro, large thermal, which may be far away, right? And then you step up the voltage, you generate at 33 kV or below 11 kV, and then you step it up to a higher voltage, which may be 230 kV or 400 kV, 800 kV, depending upon how much is the quantum of your power which you want to transfer from one place to other place, and what is the voltage level you have decided to integrate this. So once you generate, you step it up with the transformer, and that transformer would also have some losses, some small percentage of loss. Then there would be, if there is uh, another stage of transformation, let's say you first convert it into 400 kV, and then you take it to another substation, and from that another substation we again we we take the power from many other small generating stations also, and then we do that bulk power again is being transferred to another station at a higher voltage. So then that there also there would be some transmission or some transformer losses. Then once that is being sent to other substation where it is stepped down, so then that also happens. So if you take all those stages, and then once it is stepped down, then it goes to the distribution transformer, which is even at lower voltage. First sub transmission level is your 66 kV to 132 kV, and then you further step it down to 11 kV to 33 kV, and then finally comes your primary distribution, that is your user level distribution. So and your end premises. So when you look at all these efficiencies, so even the small losses like first transformation 0.5% of losses. So the efficiency, if you are starting one unit over here, your efficiency will be, let's say, 99.5%. Then next time again 1%, let's say, loss in the efficiency, or loss in the yes, efficient, or efficiency is 99%. Then like that, if you go for all the stages and you find out the overall efficiency from the first starting of the generation to your end user premises. Your end user may be an industrial consumer, which may be having further their own transformer and own distribution, right? Then you can multiply all these efficiencies and you see that your overall T&D efficiency of the transmission and distribution efficiency has come down to 87%. So that means 13% of the power we have already lost in the process. Then let's say that power goes to, this is a typical example where all the stages are considered. If few of the stages are absent, of course, you will have more better picture at the distribution level. And let's say then there is this end user, and then end user takes the power at 11 kV, like our campuses, we all take power at 11 kV, and then further step it down and then distribute it. And then there are losses in your own distribution system as well as the mechanical losses in before the actual work is done. So if that is also being taken, let's say it meet the transformer and the end user, then next is it there is typical, let's say, efficiency of that distribution transformer at end user. I have kept a very good distribution transformer which is having 95% of efficiency, and then it goes further this, and then around 30%, let's say, goes in mechanical system. So when you look into all these efficiencies, it comes out to be 50%. So what this example actually says, that if a power is being generated in a generating station far away, and then it has to follow all the stages of transformation. That means it will get step up to some higher voltage, then sent to some other substation where again the power is being bulked, and then from different stations, and then sent even at higher voltage, then towards the end again lower voltage. Then we have 2-3 stages of step down transformers from one place to other place, and then what reaches to actual use full energy is, let's say, for 1 unit of power being generated in the power plant, you will get 0.5 unit effective units there. Or other way around, if you say that for consuming 1 unit of power, we'll have to generate 2 units of power in the over there. So that indicates this example is typical example to evaluate the importance to which should be given to the distribution system operations and distribution system efficiency. Most of the time, if you see the literature, though a lot of literature has started coming up on distribution system also, but most of the time, if you see the literature or if we see our understanding, it is more for transmission level systems. So even if I talk about a power system analysis to many students or whomsoever who comes after a master's, then they will be having very good understanding about the power flow analysis of transmission system, but no inkling of what is the difference with the distribution system. Okay, so this shows that we cannot just stay idle and keep on increasing our generation for satisfying our needs, but we need to think about our needs also. And we or if we cannot reduce that generation, by one approach is that you start consuming less, but still we want to have some decent level of living and comfort conditions. So fine, we should go with that. But then how should we make our distribution system operations efficient so that our power consumption at distribution system reduces? So another important thing which I would just like to use to highlight this same thing, this is Delhi's load curve. I have taken from Delhi's SLDC site. You can anytime go there. Every day's load curve you will get. So a lot of information is available, just we need to go through that. So if you look into Delhi's load curve, in the day, a typical day I have taken, I think, again 28th of June. So it varies, it is varying like this. Okay, so these are the time, and then this is the load in megawatt. Now, if some of the curves are being plotted, like your 10th of July and 28th of December, two load curves I have taken. So if you look into the July, which is peak in Delhi, because of humidity, air conditioning load is usually high. So if you look at the peak July curve, it varies from around 7,000 megawatts to it goes somewhere around 4,000 something megawatts. That is summer peak. And if you look into the winter, it goes from as low as around 1,500 or 1,600 and as high as around 4,000 something. So can you observe something from here? So one is that there are the load curves has valleys where it is low, and then it has the peaks. Okay, so if by your smart ways, smart management, you can clip off these peaks and you can fill up these valleys. Okay, so that means if you can try to flatten this curve, so that is one. You may be able to have extra capacity available with the system, which may be used for expansion, fine, or which may be used for serving more load, more increased load. So you remember we talked about 690 gigawatt by 2030-35. So think of it then, 690 gigawatts is India's peak estimated, right? From 181 gigawatt right now. So think of that peak then gets divided into various cities, various first states, and then various cities everywhere. And then we start looking at the load curves of every place. And then let's say we start a similar way, you can look at your own household load curve, or you can look at your own campus load curve. And then if we can try to fill these valleys, and we can try to clip off these peak, so that means some of the load from here can be shifted to here. So then what will happen, the overall load curve would reduce, and the requirement of around 7,000 megawatt would not be there. So if even if we do it by, let's say, 1,000 megawatt, it's a big saving for a distribution system. Why? Because then that extra 1,000 megawatts of load can be served without increasing any capacity of distribution system. So if you have to increase the capacity of distribution system, you will have to put extra lines, extra transformers, right? So we may be able to avoid that, but that may happen if you are able to somehow reduce these, and you are able to tell the consumers to consume here. Now how do you make it possible? So there are two things which has to be kept in mind. One is your policy based mechanism, that how this would be possible. So that means some economy, something has to be done, which motivates the consumers to do that. So why, if you tell me no, no, consume here, why should I listen to you? So if you want me to listen to you, then you will have to tell me in some language which is, easily understandable to everyone in the country. So that language usually may come in, maybe in terms of tariff or in terms of price. If you start saying that, okay, consume power over here, I will take 20 rupees per kilowatt hour. You consume over here, I will take 5 rupees. Then I may start thinking. But still, even if you tell me, do I have, at times I may be conscious enough to switch off, switch on, as per your rates which you are telling me, but I may be too busy to do that, right? And so in that case, what finally we should do? So one is your financial mechanism, one is your economics, which has to be brought out, that how much should be that price, how you can motivate consumers to do that. Another thing is that how you can implement it, like how that information from your side would go to the consumer. So that is your communication aspect. Third thing is that, can you automate it? Can you ask me that, okay, tell me which are the loads in your household? I'm just giving a household example because it is more, it may be more related to our heart, so we may be able to more relate to it, but it is applicable to all big consumers also. So can you ask me previously, or maybe a week before or 2 weeks before, that, okay, you are ready for how much, how much deferment from here to there? And then let's say I say that, okay, these are the three devices which I don't mind if they get switched off or switched on. So then can you create an algorithm which automatically does this? And then algorithm is one part. Then after that, how, whatever that algorithm is telling, how my devices will understand. So can you make some smart switches like that? So that's the way, and that's the depth which we have to look into for making such efforts possible. So this is one, that within the same season you try to reduce the peaks and you try to flatten this curve. So that is known as demand response. Second is between the seasons. Now, if you look at this season maximum is going 4,500. So if we are able to somehow make this also flat somewhere around 5,000 to 4,500, we may permanently have extra capacity of 1,500 megawatt. So that's the way one can start looking into, and that's where a lot of role from your intelligent techniques, and then of course those techniques can give calculations only, how you take those calculations ahead and how do you apply into your system would come. Now, this is again the same thing. I have just kept it for more visual understanding, that if you look into every month, then this is how the yearly peak and the lows of monthly peak, any yearly peaks goes in Delhi. So one important thing which we can take from this discussion is that consumers cannot continue as consumers. They have to become prosumers. So what is prosumer and consumer? Consumer is just consuming. Prosumer is who is responding, right? So and your part of the tariff or some tariff needs to be time of demand. That means you need to bring tariffs to uh, not a fixed value. Right now we have a almost fixed tariff rather than some peak charges, but still it is more or less your fixed tariff. We have to bring to a time of demand. So that means during the day it can vary. And better algorithms you provide to distribution system or that way transmission system operators, better and better these things can be managed. So I'll just give you one example to justify what I am trying to say. Let's say right now you can one is that we take the load and generation data. How do we decide this? We find out that which are the loads, how much they are going to consume, and then we also decide upon what are the uh, how much is the generation, and then based on this matching we bring out some tariff, right? Now that can be done a single tariff for a day, that can be done two part two tariffs for two times of a day. Let's say you may say that the peak time this tariff, and then uh, off peak time this tariff. Then third case maybe you may be able to give uh, tariff for every 4 hours, right? We go closer, we may be able to give tariff for every hour, that may be different, or we may be able to give tariff for every 10 minutes, which may be right, which may be so dynamic. Now what is behind it? How do we evaluate the tariff? So basically to evaluate the tariff you need to have the information about the system, you need to have the information about the loads, you need to have information about the generation, and then you need to optimize, and then you need to calculate what all you want, and then with how much tariff that is becoming possible. So if your algorithm, which is calculating that tariff based on certain optimization, is able to give you result in 5 minutes, so that means your algorithm is fast enough, your algorithm is robust enough, it is able to take care. So then you may be able to implement a 15 minutes based tariff, right? At the same time, tariff evaluation is one thing, that is software part, that will be in your energy management system of any place. Now, once that has been calculated, how it quickly it is communicated, then along with it, how the physical devices are being uh, controlled, all those things also matters. So better, and of course we can give hour to hour, minute to minute tariff, that would be best. But what is challenging? So what is challenging is that how quickly you can calculate, then you can communicate, and then finally your devices can respond. So being researchers, you can actually pitch in at all these places and make your contribution. So if you work at, let's say, the calculation part, then you can develop better algorithms, you can develop faster algorithms, real-time algorithms. That's where a lot of machine learning techniques people have started talking about. I'll come to that why. uh, then second is you can work on the efficient communication infrastructure, you can work on IoT based communication infrastructure, you can work on reducing the cost of communication infrastructure, because that is also going to be huge, right? So you may work on low cost technologies for communication infrastructure or IoT based. Okay, fine. Now coming ahead, then what devices has to be controlled? Let's say it is a building HVAC control. So there may be some thermal level control, some electrical level control, how quickly and how best you can control them, right? So there you can pitch in, you can provide a better power electronic device which can control in a better way, better range, more precisely. So what I am trying to say is that I understand that this group is multidisciplinary group. So for achieving this also we need multidisciplinary approach. So we may be needing people who are very good with their computer programming, mathematics, so computer science, or maybe electrical, any or maybe mechanical, whosoever is good in that part. We may be needing people who can work very good on the communication. If people are from power electronics background, they can contribute in making devices in such a way that or power electronics interfaces which can help us to do this. So everybody can contribute over here and do some research, as well as you can even develop products over there. So another thing is that two things which everybody is saying, that renewable energy integration and photovoltaic is challenging, right? I agree. They are challenging. Why they are challenging? Because your renewable energy integration is renewable energy generation is difficult to predict. As compared to your thermal or hydro, the prediction is difficult. Why the prediction is difficult? Because they are too much dependent on weather, and that changes also quite changes can also be quite steep or quite unpredictable. So renewable energy forecasting or load forecasting, by that matter energy forecasting, that itself is one key area where a lot of intelligent techniques can be helpful for better forecast. Better and better forecast we have, better we are managed. So, but because of their dependency on the weather conditions, which may change drastically, they are less predictable as compared to your thermal based generation or hydro based generation or nuclear based generation. Because in thermal based generation, you have the fuel, you keep it, and then you know that tomorrow I can generate this much, depending upon your unit availability, your fuel availability. But here there is no storage, right? If wind is blowing, suddenly it starts blowing at a different speed, then your wind generation would be different. So that is one challenge. Electric vehicle, again, people are saying a lot of challenges. Yes, there are challenges because electric vehicle would provide mobile load, which was not earlier. At least till now, our loads were fixed. Only the generation was coming from somewhere, and you were so electric vehicle. You don't know whether I would charge if everywhere the charging infrastructure is available. So you don't know whether I would charge at my home, or I got up so late that I just went to office somehow and I started charging in the office. So you or someone went to mall and then they are charging there. So or some other station they are charging. So this will provide a mobile load. And mobile load, then at different buses we may have different load, more unpredictable than what we used to have. So of course this provide challenge. But if you can somehow in your energy management system, if you can somehow um, use both the photovoltaic and the electric vehicle complementarily. So if you can give a tariff structure or some methodology with which you can actually make them work, instead of against each other or against the system, to help the system, then they may provide opportunity also, because it is a mobile load. It can go from one end to other end, right? So these are the major changes between traditional distribution system and future distribution system. And why we should focus on distribution system, that I already tried to emphasize. So traditional distribution systems used to have power source somewhere else. Mostly they were being fed by a single source, and then loads were being served. So there was a unidirectional flow of power, and then there was limited information available. In fact, even in developed distribution system, like uh, comparatively, I would say that some of the distribution system in Delhi also are quite developed, and they have a lot of initiatives also. But I went there and I tried to find out the data at 400 volt. So 400 volt level data is not available. 11 kVA. So we used to have information available only at certain places. Now, what are your future distribution? How they would look like? They will have power generation at load level also, because you may have solar PV now at roof of your household. So there may be distributed generation distributed in the distribution system. So now that uh, first and basic foremost condition which we start with distribution system is say that it has only power flow in one direction, but that is gone. So now the power flow may be bidirectional, because there may be generators at the lower end also. And then of course your electric vehicle also being talked, and many of the power electronic students over here might be working on electric vehicle bidirectional charger. What is that bidirectional charge? It can take power from the grid, it can give power to the grid. So again, then feeding is also there. So overall, because of this, whatever conceptualization was being made when modeling the distribution network or analyzing the distribution network would change, and we will have more information available at various places. Because if you want to do really, you want to go till distribution and in a competitive market, then a lot of information has to be available. So more and more information is available, better monitoring and control you can do, but at the same time you will have big data problems. Once you have the big data problems, then you have the opportunity uh, to really work on big data techniques with which you can actually give some meaningful solutions for distribution system operation. And of course, there will be increased uncertainty. So uncertainty in the load or the generation would increase. So that increased uncertainty demands better distribution system operations. So earlier, there was a lot of information about transmission system operations, but distribution system operations are less discussed. So, but recently the distribution system operation, which is known as DSO operation, are becoming very important part of your integrated power system. Now, uh, when okay, let me just come to the slide. So now, what are the challenges with RE and EV? More or less, I have already discussed that with renewable energy and electric vehicle penetration, you have increased uncertainty. You have problems with you not problems. You need better forecasting. You need to have better algorithms for forecasting, and then there may be low voltage side network constraints may be different. So one is that basic thing you have to keep in mind when we are talking about small scale generations, when you are talking about solar PV, wind, which can be integrated to the grid in a smaller fraction, then you are talking about a low voltage system. And when you are talking about a low voltage system tools and techniques would not be same as that of high voltage system. High voltage system inherently is balanced. You have to analyze only one phase. Low voltage system inherently is unbalanced. You should analyze all three phases separately. Low voltage system having high R by X ratio. So whatever approximations are possible for transmission level analysis are not immediately applicable for distribution system analysis. So that's where you have to first start. You have to first start finding out the differences in the operation, and then you have to start finding out where it can contribute. So balancing, of course, three-phase balancing is also, and then we are talking about the real-time market operations. We are talking about the infrastructure development. There may be challenges related to unbalancing of the loads between the three phases. What are the opportunities? Opportunities that you go for better scheduling, better demand response programs for peak reduction and balancing of distribution. And you try to synchronize the uncertainties in EVs and PVs, large building loads. And these days we are talking about smart buildings. And when you are talking about smart buildings, actually smart building will have more controllability. And more controllability smart building has, then it can actually provide opportunity for demand response. So that building can be made to respond to your tariff signal which you are giving to reduce the peak. Okay. So, and that may help us understanding handling the uncertainties at distribution level. So let's say there are a lot of uncertainties related to load and generation, and we are able to handle it at distribution level. Then you can actually defer the investments in transmission and distribution infrastructure, and you can have a better managed transmission and distribution infrastructure. Just to give you an example, how much is let's say a average household load? Would anyone like to speak?
Ma'am, it ranges from 2 kilowatt to 5 kilowatt.
Right. Okay, 2 kilowatt to 5 kilowatt. Okay. So 5 kilowatt when in summer.
Yes, ma'am, 5 kilowatt would be in summer.
Okay. So if you are able to somehow make this constant as 4 kilowatt. Okay, first let me ask one question. So the distribution company has to give you infrastructure for 2 kilowatt, 2.5 kilowatt, 4 kilowatt, or 5 kilowatt.
It gives option. User can either take 2 kilowatt load or 5 kilowatt load.
It can take, but what is done?
Generally, a small family takes a 2 kilowatt of load.
No, I am not talking about small or large family. In my own household, if there may be variation in the load which is there in the winter, summer, or rainy season, right?
Yes, ma'am.
So let's say that load is varying from 3 kilowatt to 5 kilowatt. Okay,
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
small variation. Let's assume that. So, but the distribution system company or distribution utility has to be ready with 5 kilowatt because it doesn't know that how much I am going to take,
Yes, ma'am.
right?
Yes,
So
ma'am.
one is that all the distribution companies does some kind of forecasting and try to have that linkage, but still there are surprises. Now, if somehow we are able to tell the distribution company quite firmly that I will take only 3 kilowatt tomorrow maximum. So then the distribution company can be more confirmed. And then the distribution company from the transmission or wherever infrastructure it is purchasing power, it can aggregate its power also more confirmly because they get penalties. Now that is known as handling uncertainty at distribution level itself, or at household level, or at building level itself. How you can handle this uncertainty is, let's say I have 2 3 options. If I don't have option, I cannot do it. Let's say I have 2 3 options. I have some storage also in my house. I have some small solar PV also in my house, and then I have some of the loads which are controllable. So then do you think that I can give that kind of prediction that tomorrow maximum 3 kilowatt I will take from you, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Is it clear? So that is what I am trying to say. So if we are somehow able to make it possible to handle these uncertainty at a lower level, at a building level, at a household level, and finally at the distribution feeder level, then these uncertainties will not get penetrated into the TND infrastructure to that extent, and then they may be more confirmed and more better service can be provided. Then of course we should talk about, that's why we should talk about effective integration of storage devices, because you cannot just keep on increasing the generation or the peak capacity. Earlier, the whole planning used to be, with peak capacity. Whatever is the peak, you plan for that. But now that peak planning would not work, because if we do the peak planning, we will be spending too much in the infrastructure. So we should try to have the planning with various reschedulings, and with various DR programs. Okay, and along with that, we should try to reduce for the peak for which we need to plan. So that also leads to your effective need for effective integration of storage devices, and of course your load reduction or the loss reduction. So this, when we talk about that, we need to provide these services, then they are termed as ancillary services. So ancillary services are actually a generic term being used for any service which you provide to support the grid. So that may be the service provided to support the grid frequency. Let's say if the grid frequency is going down and then you have certain large load, you reduce it by some percentage, and because of that reduction in the load, the frequency goes to its own band. So in that case, that is termed as ancillary service. So any service which is provided to support the grid. If let's say there is voltage problem at a particular bus, and then either you have certain device with which you can provide that service to give the voltage support, or you reduce your load or do something. So all these services can be termed as ancillary services. So that leads to power balancing, that means load and generation balancing, voltage support, frequency support, inertial control. So inertial control is that more and more we move towards renewable energy sources, less and less inertia we are having in the system. So what is inertia? How for that you have to understand basic machine theory. Maybe Professor Chauhan is more expert in that. So you have to maintain the load and generation balance in the system. If you do not maintain the load and generation balance, and if let's say your real power load and generation balance is disturbed, your frequency is either increases or reduces lower than your nominal frequency. Then for that we have our synchronous generators, which are used in most of the conventional power generation like your thermal or hydro. And these generators will have automatic generation control. They respond to this frequency change, and by responding to them they will provide the extra real power, or they will reduce their real power to again bring the frequency back to normal. So this automatically generation control which happens is known as automatic generation control. So it may have primary response, secondary response, and then of course we have the tertiary response also. So this response is provides the inertia to the system to keep the frequency within that. So that is a natural inertia available with us because of synchronous generator. Now, when you move from synchronous generators to generator less or moving static devices like your solar PV, or even your wind where controllability is less, then this natural inertia is reduced. So then either you have to make your system, solar PV system or your wind generation system, artificially to have this kind of control. So that means the control or margin to control the frequency response. That is your inertial control. So that may also be termed as ancillary service. How I can do that? If I say that solar PV, I have no control, then I can keep a small battery and then use that battery for that inertial control. That is one simple approach. Another is that I may not go for MPPT point operation of solar PV, and I may say that, okay, operate the PV lesser than MPPT, then I have the margin till MPPT. So in case of frequency goes down or something like that in a microgrid environment or large scale PV, then grid environment, then I may regulate solar PV till MPPT point for giving that extra power, right? So these are some of the ways. And then of course services given to for reactive power management, harmonic and unbalancing, all these can be termed as ancillary services. Now when you think of these services, then in future there is going to be a big market for this service, and for anything where the big market is going to be, uh, there is a lot of scope for doing the early intervention through research, uh, again providing better algorithms, better devices and better communication infrastructure, right? So when you think of, and better planning, of course, we cannot neglect planning in the operations. So so these ancillary services then should have time scale aspect as well as temporal aspect. So time scale means that the time of operation, that how much is the time constant of this ancillary service. For example, if the frequency goes down, then I need a service which can quickly bring it up. Just because assume, if you are not able to visualize this, just assume a small microgrid having a solar PV system, a diesel generator, or let's say some battery. So then if let's say because of some reason the frequency or the load goes high, frequency goes down, then of course whatever is your ancillary, whether that is through battery or through diesel generator, anything that I need in certain time. So that means when you are deciding about the ancillary services, important thing is that you have to look at their time constants, and then those time constants also you can work with with devices to reduce time constant. I've seen a lot of people doing research over there. And then the temporal aspect, so that means where, how much is the requirement of ancillary services at which place. So now if you look at a larger grid or larger infrastructure, then you need, let's say if we say that you need 20% of extra power, right? As we used to say, reserve your spinning reserve and your offline reserve. So earlier reserve used to be that whatever extra generation we have to keep in the power system to give extra support. Now with this, where and how much to keep? So is it okay to keep ancillary service only at one place in the network? That may not be possible, because we may need it at different places at different time, and then there may be again transmission losses. If you keep it at 100 kilometer away somewhere, and you say that whenever you need you will take that power from that, then it may not be worthwhile to provide that service. So that means temporal aspect, where, how much, and then what time scale ancillary service you have to provide. So a lot of things can be done here. This is just about electric vehicles. Some of the news clips which is saying that how India is planning to expand for electric vehicles. Building energy sector, I already said that building energy sector can also provide ancillary service, and this is some of the data which says that how the cities would move. India will have, how the cities will move for a more urban population, and how the it is expected to have the more load. But this is from some uh, McKinsey Global Institute analysis. So some indicative analysis, I would say that. And then buildings are going to become large consumers of electricity. And even if you look into, around us, earlier, when 10 years back, every household may not be even having, maybe having one AC per household maximum, or not one AC. But now people have AC, air conditioning almost in every room, right? That is because of the development into that sector and bringing down the cost of those things. But at the same time, the energy consumption is increasing many folds. So buildings are going to be large consumers of electricity, so they provide more potential for optimization and more potential for interventions over there. So any questions till now? I would like to go for the need for analysis, optimization, and management. More or less, I think I have already covered it with the previous slide. So now, why you need to analyze? If we talk about any transmission system, distribution level system, or microgrid level, why you need to analyze? You need to analyze to keep the system well within operating limits. So if we do not analyze, then our system may violate the limits, and we may have negative impacts. Or all of us understand, if voltage goes high, very high at any point of time, many of the devices in the household also get corrupt, right? So we need to analyze the system, but we will need more analysis with these changes in the power system. Another important power system change, which I forgot to mention over there, is your deregulated operation. Now, what is the deregulated operation? Earlier, your generation, transmission, and distribution used to be under one utility, like one company. So mostly government. So now you can see that there is 47% contribution of private sector in the generation. So generators are by now, generation is by government sector as well as private sector, as well as your distribution is also having government as well as private sector. So this has also led to a different operation, that a complex operation as compared to earlier operation. And transmission infrastructure is more or less still owned by the government because it is huge infrastructure. But we have benefits of uh, bringing out different players and participants into the power network, but at the same time, that provides challenge. So the power market becomes competitive. So when it becomes competitive, so let's say there is some load to be served, and there are various types of generators available, then they would bid for it. They would bid for it, and then they may give different prices. So the power flows which may come up may not be very predictable from the very beginning. So that these all these things provides more challenge for power system operation, and that's why the need for analysis and optimization and management increases more. And we have more need for that. So why you need optimization method? First of all, just I'll give you one example, one very simple example. I want to eat 3 chapatis for my dinner, okay, and I have 3 only. So do I need optimization?
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt in between.
Yes.
There is one question
Okay.
from participant side. May I proceed with that?
Yeah, yeah, please.
It is from Sangeeta Mangesh that do we have any values for electric system reliability indices defined?
Yeah, Sangeeta, practically, I really don't know how much reliability analysis in Indian context we do. Okay, whether that is really being taken or not, but theoretically, in many of the research work, you can find out some indices which are based on your rate of failure and rate of your repair, and for thermal units you may get. But for new units and for the new types of this, I have not seen personally.
ma'am, are they being followed by the power players, distribution interruption indices?
To some extent, at certain places, it all depends upon which country, which distribution we are talking about. So that's why I was giving the example which I am giving right now. If I have 3 chapatis to eat and I want to eat 3 chapati for my dinner, do I have choice? Yes. Do I have choice? Anyone? So then I don't have choice. I will eat those 3 only. But rest, just as an example, if I have 5 chapatis and I want to eat 3 only, so then do I have choice?
Yes, surely we have choice, no?
So
Among the five.
then only I will optimize, right? Then only I will optimize, because this is very, what Sangeeta has asked is very important question. Many of the distribution utilities, specifically in our master courses, we have some part-time students, they will say that there is no problem in distribution system operation. Everything is fixed. From where we will purchase power, how much we will purchase power, and if load shedding has to be done, which area we will do load shedding. Everything is fixed. So there is no problem in distribution system operation. So actually there is no problem in distribution system operations or any operations till the time I don't have choice. Right? So if you start having choice, which we should gradually have, if so, that's why initially I gave reference to Indian power sector to, initially I'll come back to you, Sangeeta. So initially I gave reference to Indian power sector so that we can relate what we are talking. But now I am telling you to come out of Indian power sector, because if we just look at the distribution system maybe right now, we may not be in a very we may have certain choices. Still, our distribution system or transmission system is not bad at all. We are quite good, but yes, behind many of the on the world level or global level, there may be many interventions which we may still do. That is what I would like to say. So when you have more choice, then only the optimization or the management would come into picture. When let's say I have only one generator which is supplying to me, if it is not supplying, then I am gone. Then the power has to cut, right? And then I remember one of my class where one of my student told me a very big area in Delhi which they cut. So I said that if you can cut a big area happily, then there is no need of doing any. Actually, there is no need. There is no problem in distribution network. Then you are already managing well. So what she has written is, Sangeeta has written is, good governance would have. So Sangeeta, good governance with good, as I said that, with if governance says that okay, go ahead for competition, go ahead for better management, then you need the better algorithms, then you need the better control devices, and then you need better communication infrastructure. So only governance may also not be able to take us to that level. Everything would matter. And then, of course, behind each one of them is a big factor, which is your cost. So end of the day, we have to do the cost minimization, cost optimization. Okay. So is something closer to clear, Sangeeta?
Sangeeta, I hope your query is answered.
Okay. So if not 100%, then maybe I'm expecting to some extent. And then you may go through a lot of research papers which are there, which may not be, again, for distribution. These indices information would also be less. But for thermal power plant, for transmission level system, this indices values would be there. Okay. Okay, thank you. So should I go ahead or any other questions?
Ma'am, no more question at present. Please continue.
So as I gave you the example, only when you have choices, then you have the scope for optimization. If you have less choices or you have no choices, then we have to take whatever it is, right? So now I'll be discussing, let's think that, let's hope that we'll have choices. If in microgrid level, wherever the small microgrids are there, we have been working on 2 microgrids into 2 rural villages. So we have seen that we have got choices, because there your installed capacity is more than what is required, and then there are 2-3 resources, then there are 2-3 options of giving fuel. So we have choice. So when you have choice, then you have to exercise it, and when you and then you have to exercise this for some betterment, and there comes the need for better optimization techniques. So when we talk about the transmission system, why you need to analyze? You need to analyze more now because of the integration of renewable energy sources and expected integration with electric vehicles and deregulated operation. And then once you analyze, then you understand that okay, this is after analysis what will happen. Let's say you have done a power flow study or a state estimation study, then you analyze the security and you understand the system security is under threat. Then the next is that how would you remove that threat? Whether you would increase the generation, whether you would change some of the setting of your controllers, which may be power electronics controller or power flow based controllers, line controllers, or maybe some capacity banks which you may switch in or out, or some reserve generation, anything. I don't know what control you are talking about, but I'm because there can be many things which you are doing, but anywhere where you are working, on which level you are trying to intervene. So once you analyze, you understand security is in threat, then you have to see that what can you do. And if these controls doesn't work, then the last control is reduce the generation or reduce the load. So on contrary to what practically people say that then we know where to reduce the load, I would say that reduction in load or load shedding should be a last option, right? First, we should try to exercise other control. If I have reserve, I should exercise my reserve. If I have some power flow controller which can give me some flexibility, I should use that. If I have certain voltage controller which can increase the voltage or decrease the voltage as per requirement to bring that system back to security, I should exercise those. So we should first exercise whatever natural controls and additional controls are there in the power system. And if they do not work, then of course the load shedding or the generation shedding is our last resort, last option to be done. Similarly, if you come to know that stability is under threat, right? Your system is close to instability, then you may like to work on how you can bring the system back to stability. So for doing that, you may be having many choices. So just to give you an example, let's say there is a voltage problem in a network. We analyzed the network. Let's say we have a small 30 bus system, some practical system, and there at 2 buses, after doing a load flow, you have understood that at those 2 buses, the voltage is lower than permissible, right? So problem is clear. We have some 30 bus system, and after doing a power flow, we came to know that, okay, these 2 buses are having low voltage. Now, what is your option? What all you can do? So, to increase that voltage, you may look into the voltage support options, that how you can increase that voltage. So let's say if it is a transmission system, voltage is primarily impacted by reactive power exchange. Then you may try to give reactive power which is required by the system so that that voltage can come up. Now that reactive power can be changed, or that voltage support can be given either by some nearby synchronous generator, right? You can change its voltage setting, and because of that the excitation current can be changed to give that terminal voltage, and overall the reactive power exchange can be changed. That is one option with you. Second option is that there may be some capacitor bank, or maybe the first option can be the capacitor bank on that bus itself. You may switch it on to provide the reactive power. If it is not there, there may be capacitor bank into the nearby buses which can be switched on to provide this reactive power. Good. There may be tap changing transformer where you can change the tap and provide the voltage control to these 2 buses. Or there may be some power electronics based power flow controller, like your unified power flow controller, UPFC or SVC or TCSC, something like that is there. So though TCSC is more for power flow, but SVC will be there. So you have multiple choices. Now, when for this simple problem, you have 3-4 choices, right? And now which choice you should use, which is giving you the most benefit. So one is that which may be giving you the most benefit in terms of voltage support. Another may be which may be least costly, which may be easily doable, least cost operation. So it depends upon your objective. So whenever we have choices, then you can implement certain, you can have some to exercise the right choice, you may use the optimization technique. So that is where you will come into, you will encounter the various types of optimization methods, and from where you can choose. So if we go little ahead, then why and where optimization. So where there you have certain objective which you want to satisfy. For example, in the example which I gave you, I had two bus voltages which were lower than your base value, and I wanted to bring that back. So that was my objective. Your objective may be something else. You want to reduce the loss in the network, and then when you want to reduce the loss in the network, you would like to see what are the various options to reduce the loss. So we should have, or you may like to reduce the cost of the operation. It may be anything. So when we have certain objective to be specified, satisfied, then only I need the optimization. And then this optimization is always done under certain constraint. So that means if you look at a simple economic dispatch problem for power system, if you say that I want to dispatch power most economically, so you have 4 generators, each generator is having a different fuel cost characteristic. So what is the basic simple economic dispatch? You will first switch on the least cost generator. Then you will see whether your load is satisfied or not. If it is not satisfied, you will switch on the next least cost generator. And if it is not satisfying, next one. Like that, you will satisfy your load by least cost of operation. So that is one scenario where you have not taken any constraint. You are just saying that I want most economical generation, and this is my total load. Now the second case becomes when your transmission network is there in the picture, and one of the line is cannot transmit more than that. So whatever generations came from those 4 generators, one of the generation which is least cost cannot be transmitted, because there is no transmission line between them, or even if it is there, it is low capacity. So that has given a constraint. So you'll have to move away from your best solution. What was your best solution? Run the least cost generator first. But now you cannot do that because that is not able to transmit the power. So that becomes constraint. So when you need optimization, when you need to satisfy something, you have certain objective to be met. And of course, most of the time these objectives are under certain constraint which you should take. And then you have multiple ways of satisfying that objective. If I do not have multiple ways of satisfying an objective, please do not put any optimization algorithm. Just give me the same, that only existing solution, one solution. So that means only when I have multiple solutions for the same problem, but each solution gives me a different objective value. So then I want to use the one which satisfy my objective in the best way. And each solution satisfy all the constraints. So that's why these are 3 important things which in any optimization one has to look at. And now, of course, we need to find out the best way. So if you look into this space, usually every optimization person will draw such type of diagram and will say that this is the solution, right? So let's say this is a search space, this inside thing. Outside this, we say that any solution outside this space is violating the constraint. So then this is the constraint space. So that means under this space, whatever solution is there, that is the right solution. None of the solution is wrong. Every solution is providing, but each one will be giving a different value of objective. Then we want to achieve the solution which gives me the maximum benefit in terms of my objective. Now, if my objective is cost based, I want to minimize the cost of something, then I would go for the minimum cost objective. If my solution is, let's say, loss based, I want to minimize the losses, then I would go for the solution which gives me the minimum loss, which may not be giving the minimum cost, right? There may be solution more than one objective known as multi-objective, where we try to have the best compromise between 2 objectives. So any solution among this space, we will say that can provide you the is the right solution, but we want to reach to the best solution, and that best solution is known as global optimum. But all these solutions which exist, which are feasible solution, which may not be the best solution, but which are feasible solution, are known as your local optimum. So an optimization method is said to be very good if it is able to search this global optimum. Now, when we start, we may be anywhere on the search space, and then how quickly and how efficiently I am able to reach to this global optimum, that is what makes my algorithm contributing more or charming. So it depends upon algorithm, which algorithm you are using, how you are using, and so that's where you need, uh, once you need the optimization, then you represent any problem into set of decision variables. These decision variables over here are written x1, x2 up to xn, just keeping it generic, but uh, they may be your generator bus voltages, they may be your generations, they may be your loads, they may be anything depending upon what you are looking for. And then we have certain objective to be minimized, and on those so this objective I want to minimize effects with the change in the settings of, or with the change in the values of these control variables, such that these constraints are always meeting. So we have the constraint known as equality constraint and inequality constraint, as well as there may be constraint on even your decision variables. The decision variable also can vary between certain values. So let's say if your voltage at for PV bus at a generator bus is a decision variable, then it can vary between 0.9 to 1.1 only. You cannot make it go out of that band. So that is your limit maybe on the decision variable. So any optimization problem generically, then we bring it to this structure and then we solve it. Then how do you solve it? There are various techniques. In fact, many techniques which are being used in literature and which practically also being used. Now, some of the categories can be your classical optimization techniques. Three categories you can divide: classical optimization techniques, heuristic methods, and meta-heuristics. So your classical optimization techniques are more mathematical based techniques, and where you end up with same solution, but they have some peculiar, way of working. So like your techniques like gradient, Newton's method, linear programming, non-linear programming, integer point, all this comes under the category of classical optimization techniques. So just to give you an example, if it is linear programming, then of course it says that the problem has to be first of linear type. And if your problem which you are trying to solve is non-linear, then you will have to convert that problem into linear first. So if there are any electrical, many of the electrical students must be there. Can I ask you, the power flow problem is a linear or non-linear problem? If I try to do the optimal power flow, is it going to be a linear or non-linear? Okay, so that's non-linear by nature. And if you want to use a linear programming method, that means you will have to linearize that function. Once you linearize the function, you already introduce some small sort of error into that. So that's where we have to be smart in choosing the right optimization method. So coming from, you need better energy management systems, then you can focus on better algorithm. To bring out the better algorithm, you have to be smart to choose the right methods also, right optimization methods also. Which type of problem? So two places you can intervene. One is that how you frame your problem. Second is which method you use to solve them. But wherever possible, still I would say that wherever possible you can use classical optimization method, please go for them, because they are very robust. They will provide the same solution every time you run them. Then the second type of methods are your heuristic based methods. Heuristic methods are those which are based on scientific knowledge, and there are certain rules which we say. I give you just one example. You have 4 generators and you want to satisfy certain load, and you want to go for minimum cost operation. So what will you do? You will first switch on the generator which is the least cost, and then if that doesn't satisfy the load, you will switch on next. So this is your scientific experience based decision making. This dispatch though is known as priority based dispatch, and as one of the student was asking what is being used in industry right now also quite a bit, for this part I can say priority based dispatch they do. Okay, but that is just some rules are there based on our knowledge. So these heuristic methods are very simple to implement because they are just on certain rules we have set up, which are not very random, but so they are very easy to use. But their problem is they will always provide you suboptimal solutions. Now you understand what is optimal and suboptimal. So because these are heuristic, they go one by one. So they end up usually with suboptimal solution. Classical optimization techniques can give you global optimum, but only if your problem is being framed properly. Another important thing is that most of the classical optimization techniques would need a direct relationship between your objective function and the control variable. So that means these classical optimization would always want you to make an equation of your objective function with your control variables. If you are not able to bring out that direct equation, then you cannot apply them. So that is one of the biggest challenge, because of which only the meta heuristics or your intelligent techniques started emerging. So your meta heuristic techniques are more like your nature inspired algorithm or intelligent techniques, which which mimics certain behavior. So in genetic algorithm, it mimics that how genes interact with each other to find out the better solution or better this thing. Harmony search, how a musician try to find out the best harmony. Then particle swarm optimization based on the birds, how they flock. And then there are many. There are many which are ant colony. Then many titles are there. Cuckoo search, this, that, then differential evolution. So you will not be able to even remember so many are there. So, but I don't. We have personally worked quite extensively on this. So I don't discourage people to work on them, but you have to be mindful where do you apply them. Okay, so that we are going to just discuss in next 30 minutes. That how do you decide where to apply them? Okay. So these are based on survival of fittest. So they will say that generate many solutions randomly. Generate as many solutions as you want randomly, and then whatever is the good solution that will survive, that will go. So this is typical survival of fittest. Any questions? There is some sound. Anybody would like to say anything? Okay.
Ma'am, sorry to interrupt in between. Ma'am, it would be a kind request to you if you wind up within 15 minutes so that rest of the 15 minutes we could take up the participants' queries.
Okay, no problem. Yeah, I will find out in just 15 minutes. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay. So then after, so I think I thought that I will finish many of the things in 2 hours, but when I start doing it, then it takes time. Okay, fine. So any questions still here? So I would just quickly, I'll not go into details of these methods then. I will just go into more important thing, that how do you decide how to use them. So then this is some comparison table which tells that what is the comparison between classical heuristic and meta heuristic. This you can search in literature or make your own table. I'll just skip through this. But what is important is that you need to select the right or appropriate optimization method for a particular problem. Okay, so if anyone says that I have used genetic algorithm for economic dispatch, that is not acceptable, because you have to see how much time genetic algorithm or any meta heuristic takes to run, and then how quickly you need the settings for economic point of the dispatch. So that is where you have to see. If you are using them for planning, then fine. So one of the difficulty with these methods is they believe on survival of fittest. They generate large number of initial solutions, and from there they based on whatever type of method you have used, it will try to mimic certain behavior. So there are many behavior naturally existing in animal and birds and other species, which is collective behavior of working or collective approach for taking. For example, the way ants take food or they search for food. So how they work together. So that's the way it makes your control variables work together to find out the perfect solution, right? So because of that, they start with large number of initial solutions, which may be randomly generated. And then based on whatever process has been mimicked by that algorithm, they would update those solutions, and towards the end they would try to say that you will reach to global optimum. So these methods, if they are being run for a sufficient time, they can actually these methods, if you run them for a sufficient time, they can actually ensure global optimum. But mind me, I have said that if they are run for sufficient time, then only they can uh, guarantee the global optimum. So that means they can reach to the global optimum point. Benefit with them is that unlike your conventional optimization techniques, they do not need a direct relationship between your objective function and control variables, and they can handle your complex objective functions as well as complex constraints very easily, because this is indirect approach. They will work on it indirectly. So one of the method I would quickly discuss to give that overview. So this I have already said mostly. So let's say you are using a genetic algorithm initially for whatever is your problem. Let's say I want to have the optimum dispatch between three generators. So I have three set of solutions, PG1, PG2, PG3. So you generate a large number of initial solutions randomly through random number generation. And then you use three operators which are known as G operators for improvising the solution. But before improvising the solution, we need to find out for each of the solution whether this solution is good or not. So how do you find out which solution is good? Let's say initially I generated 20 solutions, and those 20 solutions are random solutions. From those random solutions, we find out one fitness value which is dependent on the objective function. So here the objective was to minimize the cost plus some penalties for constraint violation. So let's say our problem is minimize. Let's say our problem is just minimization of very simple problem for which we are talking about minimization of cost of generation for all generators, and subject to simple constraint that your total generation should be equal to total load. So that bare minimum we need, otherwise frequency would not be in the range. So this is the problem. For this problem, we are using a genetic algorithm. So initially we generated some 20 solutions, which was giving me values of PG1, PG2, and PG3. Three generators we are having, and with that three generator we want to do this. And then we calculate fitness of each of that solution, how good that solution is fit for this problem, which will be through the objective function, that means the value of the objective function with that PG1, PG2, PG3, and the constraint violation. So if there is penalty if, let's say, total load is not equal to total generation. So what will this penalty do? This will make, let's say, certain solution is having a lower cost, but if there is a violation, it will add to that solution and it will make it more, value will be increased. So, and my problem is minimization. So eventually it will start telling me that this is not a good solution because its value is higher than other solution. And like that for all those solutions, here it is 12, but let's say 20 solution or 12 solution, you will calculate the fitness. With this fitness value, you will give the feedback to your algorithm. And on this feedback, the algorithm would work. So another step is that first is that you generate the population, second is you calculate the fitness, then after calculating the fitness, you check whether you have achieved the maximum iterations or not. If you have not achieved the maximum iterations, then you go back to you do the genetic operators. Now these genetic operators are based on genetic algorithm and or based on the behavior through which genes they interact with each other and they create the new ones. So there are three genetic algorithms. Like that, if you are using bat algorithm, you are using ant colony, there would be different operators. So that's the only difference over here, which comes in one type of method to other type of method application. So if you have applied, let's say, genetic algorithm for a particular problem and you want to change it with PSO, this is the only part where you will have to change. So three operators which we use in genetic algorithm are reproduction, crossover, and mutation. So in reproduction, what is being done? copies of the solutions which are good are being created and the bad solutions are being discarded. So if you have 20 solutions, out of which, let's say, 2 solutions were very good, you will create a copy of those solutions and discard the worst one. So you will make your population or your initial solutions next time little better. Another is crossover and mutation. Because I am discussing here, I am taking here example of binary GA. You will just exchange some of the bit between the 2 solutions. So you will pick up 2 solutions, and out of those 2 solutions, you will just exchange some of the bits. Okay. So then you will generate 2 new solutions. Third step is your mutation, where you just exchange some bits from 0 to 1. So with this, after doing these 3 operators or operations, you will get a new set of solutions. And then you again go back and again check those solutions for their fitness to the problem. And then you repeat this. So only difficulty with these methods are very simple to apply. Only difficulty with them is that they take large number of iterations to reach to the global optimum. And every time when you run them, they do not ensure that they will give you the same solution, because they start from a random value. So it's like that. If you have a solution space, just let me just take 1 more minute for this. If you have a solution space and this is the global optimum. So it depends upon from where you are starting initially. If you are starting from here, your path and how your path is there. After crossover mutation, how are you following the path? So depending upon that, it will take time. So let's say in one trial or in one first set of iterations, you started from here. So you may reach till this only. And in another trial, you started from here. So you may quickly reach to a better solution, even global optimum. So you may also start, most of the time you start from out of boundary solutions, which are not feasible. Okay, so this is the largest problem with these methods, that every time you run them, because they start from another new random point, they may emerge with different solutions. So that's why you need to do 30 to 50 such trials before saying that your solution is optimal or your solution is global. So if you take, let's say, a very small problem, 3 variable problem, 3 generator problem, 20 size of their number of solutions, and you run it for 500 iterations, and then you have to do it 30 times. So you can understand how many number of iterations you will have to do. Because of this, these methods are time consuming. So if you use them, you have to choose them only if they are viable. They can give you the result before you need that result. Okay, so that's one of the thing which you should look into. And some of the regional transmission utilities which has data on the open platform for understanding that how they operate, is one of them is PJM website, where they coordinate 13 states of Colombia and districts of Colombia. So this, if you want to click a picture, you can click a picture. You can use this to read and understand the power system operation, but mostly at transmission level. At distribution level, no such document I have come across till now. So if anyone wants, they can take a picture and go through this. And this is one of India's POSOCO security constraint economic dispatch pilot study, where they have tried to do security based analysis, at least at a pilot level. So that shows us the light that we are also moving towards better energy management system and better algorithms, and we are talking about it. So one important takeaway from the optimization is you should be very careful in choosing the right optimization method. These 3 categories you should analyze properly. Each category has certain benefits and certain challenges. Meta heuristics are gaining a lot of importance because of their ease to use, but you should be mindful where to use them. Similarly, machine learning techniques, they are gaining a lot of importance because of they have a lot of application in forecasting. They have a lot of application in many power system operations also. Why? Because wherever you do not have the direct relationship between your control variables and your output variables, or your input and output variables, their machine learning techniques may make sense. But again, you have to be very careful in using them. if I want to do a 5-minute dispatch and your machine learning algorithm gives me result after 10 minutes, it is of no use to me. Okay, so you have to go into those details. And this is, I'll just skip through this, but this is some of the activities which I would like to show, which our lab students are doing specifically for building energy management system. So we have developed some smart switches, and we have also tested them through on our lecture hall complex, and then we have developed the back end algorithms for optimal, here it is more of pattern based switching on and off of lights, as well as this hardware has been developed, which is an IoT based intervention and very low cost intervention for Indian context. So here you don't need to change your switch. We can just add on this extra device, and then this can make our normal conventional switch into smart. So just to give you some idea that how we are working, and then if it may be helpful to any of you. And similarly, we have developed this lighting controller first in the lab setup, and then in the practical setup, and then some application based. Everywhere you need mobile applications, so that is also there for students to use. Then we have also worked on demand side management controllers, and we have actually developed a demand side management controller, which with what I was explaining, that if you can give a constant power requirement to grid, it can make it stable. So with the generation and resource scheduling, it can provide you the, it can respond to tariff based signal as well as the optimization based signal. And there my students has developed actually the optimization in initially in MATLAB, then we used the interfaces to dump into the controller, but then later on they went to Java based platforms and Python based platforms for doing it into the real controller. And this is in the similar way we have converted our normal panel meters into smart energy meters, which can acquire the data. And this we have the controller behind the meter, and this controller behind the meter actually can control some of the lights also through smart switching, as well as this can be very useful solution for a Wi-Fi based system, because we do not kept any storage over here. Everything goes on the cloud. So these are some of the things which we already worked. And then this is that home energy management system, which can reduce the uncertainties in distribution system. Most of this work is now these two are patented, but sent for patent, but these works are published in IEEE transactions, which you can find through Google Scholar, and you can understand that there are some certain papers on buildings you can download and read through them if you wish. So these are some of the results with that. Then we are also working on smart electric charging infrastructure, where we are trying to work on one is on the charger side, which my colleague is working, but we are working on the algorithm side, where we can provide a better distribution system, the operational algorithm for a coordinated charging of infrastructure. So like that. So thank you very much. Next, I would not go about 4:15, as Lakshmi said. Okay. So now I am open for.
So
Have the discussion for question
yes,
answer.
yes, ma'am. So over to the participant.
Yeah.
If you have any query, please write it down.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Ma'am, like for a given problem, if I am having, let us say, numerous number of meta-heuristic techniques, so how do I select that which technique should be used for a particular application?
Yes. So, Dhananjay, sorry, we had less time for this whole discussion over here, because we discussed from another end also, but this is very important point and important question. So you have to actually look at the structure of that. Even are you talking to only meta heuristic? You are asking me for
Yes,
many.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Only for meta-heuristic
So
approaches.
even only for meta heuristics you can think of two ways. One is your binary based, one is your decimal coding based, right? So when you look into the binary based algorithm, you should look into what kind of control variables you are actually having. So if your control variables are more of binary, like 0-1 type, so for example, your unit commitment problem, then you should actually choose the algorithm which is binary based by nature. Okay. If your control algorithm is your continuous variable, then if you go for binary GA, it may not give you better result. Your PSO may give you better result, which is more decimal based. Okay. Now the challenge is that most of the time your problems may be mixed variable, right? So accordingly, then you have to try them out and choose them.
So ma'am, only the variables are the parameter that I have to consider.
No, it has to be the objective function, complexity. To be very frank, meta heuristics, no such rule can be told, right? It is more, you have to try them out and then see which one is working better. I have seen for the same problem, let's say the harmony search came out to be very good, but for another problem, the same algorithm is not coming out to be very good. The other one is coming out to be very good. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
So
Okay.
it is the complexity of your objective function, complexity of your constraint, your binary variable. But this binary variable or your type of variable, I said, because this is the most easiest choice you can make, at least to start with. Because you
Okay, ma'am.
understand what kind of variable you are having. You may be having variables which are discrete. For example, your capacitor or tap settings, right? So then you may
Mhm.
think of something which can give you discrete values and which can be originally coded into discrete. So that's the way one can think, but still there is no set rule. You have to try it, then freeze it. Fortunately, if you freeze it for one problem after every trial, then it remains same. Let's say for transmission expansion planning, I found that out of GA, PSO, differential evolutionary algorithm, bacteria foraging, harmony search is better. So then it was better for all the transmission expansion problems. Okay, so that way it is confirming. And another thing is that when you do the comparison between the various meta heuristics, it is important to tune the parameters of each one of them appropriately. Do you understand tuning of parameters?
Ma'am, could you shed light on a bit light on that?
Yeah, so tuning of parameters, I mean that in genetic algorithm, let's say there are two parameters, crossover probability and mutation probability. I could not cover them in that detail. So you have to, for a particular problem, you have to find out that which value of crossover probability or mutation probability is giving you the best result. Okay, so then you have to freeze the parameters to that. So if you can just drop an email to me, in one of our paper we have shown that parameter tuning. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
So,
I'll surely contact you for this.
so you tune your parameters, then only you test that algorithm. Because what happens if, let's say, you have used the right parameters for harmony search, but you have not used the right parameters for PSO, then this comparison is not fair. So you have to first tune each of the parameter of each of the meta heuristic and then test them and then compare them. So for PSO, you have C1, C2, and W. You should tune them. So, and how do you decide whether which parameter is good or bad? With different settings of the parameter, you do the 30 runs, out of which you find out some of the things like your maximum deviation, your average objective, your best objective, how many trials your objective, same value of the objective got repeated, or global objective got repeated. All those things are indicative of telling you which parameter setting is good. So there is a table which you have to make, which usually I teach in my class. So that table is there in one of the paper also, I think. So you can actually go through that. That will give you idea about tuning of parameters. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
So any other questions? I think there are certain things. So thank you. Some of you are writing which was informative. So I'm happy that I could do some justice of coming here and talking.
Yes, so many appreciation are there from the participant side. So participants, are there any more queries from your side? Considering that there are no queries from your side, I have